everyone, and welcome to another MSP event. I'm super excited to get started. Hi, Pete. How are you?
I'm awesome.
Awesome. Hey, Paul. How are you?
Hey guys, how you doing? Good.
Hello,
Good.
hello.
As we let folks trickle in, as you know, MSP Fashion, I love to start things off with a fun icebreaker. Since we are in North America and also other parts in the world, winter time, I love to
hmm
know what our expert panelist guests online with me today. What is your favorite winter activity? Pete, you can start things off.
Well, I would probably say like skiing and snowboarding, although
hmm
unfortunately I don't really get a chance to do that as much as I'd like because we have a 5-year-old. So maybe my favorite winter activity right now is like doing Legos with
Oh,
him. So, but maybe that's an always activity. I don't know. Paul, what's your favorite winter activity? Because you're in Salt Lake City area, so you
Yep,
got all
I'm in Salt Lake City.
you got all those mountains right there.
Oh yeah, and we've got a ton of new powder. The last couple of days is coming down outside pretty good right now. But my favorite wintertime activity is scuba diving, someplace warm.
What?
Seriously, I grew up near Miami. The ocean is always been a big part of my life, and wintertime in Utah is the best time to go somewhere warm and get in some of
Mm.
my get my dive fix on. So we're headed to Hawaii, for example, mid-January. So
Whoa.
yeah. Anyway, so
What
that's my
about what
favorite.
about what
well,
what about you, Angelica?
I just picked up snowboarding during COVID time. So I've been up in the mountains and Whistler. It just opened up for us this season. So I was just there with some friends. So snowboarding is definitely my winter activity.
Nice.
I love it. I love it.
Awesome.
I want to see videos. I want to see videos. I want to see videos and or I imagine your snowboarding outfit is hella cute because you always have
Um,
like you always have the best
Oh,
clothes.
there it is. It's
oh, thank you.
snowboard.
Well, this is I just got a new snowboard. It's orange.
Yeah.
So,
Nice.
Ooh, snowboard and
yeah,
tequila. Two great tastes taste great together.
I know, right? Do not drink on the mountains. Safety. My outfit is actually all black, and I have a pink helmet and then an orange snowboard. Because I
Very
found with night
identifiable from a
skiing,
distance. There she is.
absolutely,
Pink
yeah.
helmet.
hmm
When I went night skiing the other night, I saw folks wearing all white, and there sometimes when they would fall, I can't see them. And pro
Oh,
tip
right.
for anyone doing night skiing: do not wear white because you can blend with the snow, and it's
Mm,
dangerous.
let's not do that. Nice.
Let's not do
Yeah.
that.
Good
All
point.
right, let's get started. I'm sure everyone is excited to hear Sales Manager Enablement Best Practices with Paul Butterfield. But before we begin, today's event is brought to you by the team at Modern Sales Pros. And for those of you who are not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to solve questions they struggle to solve on their own, and we do this through live sessions like the one you're at today. We also have an online robust forum and our quarterly summits, which I'll talk about in the next slide. And so if you're not already part of this awesome community, you'll be invited to join right after this event. And speaking of our summit, I'm super excited to announce that we're back with another Revenue Excellence Summit happening on January 24th to 26th, the Mega SKO. Join us for the Mega SKO with 20 plus content tracks, 5,000 modern sales pros in attendance, plus 500 plus high caliber speakers. You can hear from
Hmm.
leaders at Drift, Sales Loft, Lean Data, Stage 2 Capital, plus so much more. Don't miss out next year and sign up today. I'm actually going to drop the registration link in the chat to secure your ticket. And some quick housekeeping notes. Don't forget this event is being recorded, so if you have a friend or a colleague who couldn't make it, don't worry. The recording and key takeaway will be made available on the MSP previous event page before the end of day. And if you have a question for Paul and Pete, definitely leverage the Q&A function at the top right-hand corner or use the chat function. And I also love to know where everyone is calling in from and also your favorite winter activities, so definitely leverage the chat and let us know. Now I'm going to pass it off to Pete to say a few words about Atrium and then kick off things with introductions, and then I'll come back for wrap up.
Thanks, Ange. You're the best. Hey, everyone. My name is Pete Kazanji. A little bit more on me here in a second, but I work at Atrium. Atrium makes data-driven sales management software. So it's software that helps sales managers, so AE, SDR, AM, CSM managers, use data to improve team performance. And so the way that Atrium does that is by continuously monitoring dozens and dozens of AE and SDR KPIs and proactively alerting managers and leadership and reps when something is off with a rep, a team, etc. And so what this means is that managers can get to coaching insights faster and drive positive behavior change, right? Because like change behavior in order to react to that and improve performance and win. And so the great thing about all of that is it takes 2 minutes to set up a free Atrium account with a read-only connection to your Salesforce CRM. So that's a little bit about us over here at Atrium. Super pumped to have Paul here again today. Sales enablement, revenue enablement, expert par excellence. So for folks to do a little bit of more background on me, I am one of the founders and founders and CRO at Atrium here. Prior to Atrium, I started a recruiting software company called Talentpin. It was acquired in 2014 by Monster Worldwide, and that's like really where I went from being a kind of like a business generalist founder to our first seller, our first sales manager, and then our first sales leader at Talentpin. When we were acquired, we had around a 20-person sales organization or so, and then I was responsible for new product sales at Monster Worldwide thereafter. So that's a little bit about me. Subsequent to that, I wrote a book on on startup sales called Founding Sales, and then started Modern Sales Pros. So Paul, maybe you can give folks a little bit of a context on what you spend your time doing at Accenture, and maybe a role or two before that.
Sure. Well, currently, really got two things. My day job is at Instructure. I've been here a little over 3 years. We are an ed tech firm. A lot of your listeners, if they've been in school or have anyone in their lives that's been in K-12 through higher ed recently, they probably know Canvas. It is the core of our platform, and it's the one that's the dominant in North America. But we're 100% ed tech. And the other thing I am doing is I am now the board president for the Sales Enablement Society, which is volunteer, but a lot of fun. I've been here, like I said, a little over 3 years. Prior, I spent about 7 years actually, in the Unified Communications as a Service, UCaaS, and Contact Center as a Service, CCaaS, with Vonage, and before that, a company called InContact. InContact and Instructure are too similar. It took me months after I got here, and I almost just said it now. So so that's what I've been doing.
Nice. These are wonderful. We'll get into a little bit more about your background here in a second, because I think there's a lot of folks who are kind of interested in following along in a similar career path as you. But for folks who are interested, we have an offer here today. If folks would like to get a copy of The Qualified Sales Leader, wonderful book by John McMahon, the CRO of Parametric Technology Corporation and kind of father of Medic, MedPick, etc., and Atrium Coffees for Coaches Yeti. You can go ahead and just go ahead and sign up through the hyperlink that we're going to go ahead and drop here in the chat. So with that, let's go ahead and get jamming here. So Paul, I think what would be kind of fantastic is to kind of share a little bit, because like Instructure, how big is Instructure's sales organization? 100 reps or so?
Yeah, we're about 200 if you everybody all in.
Yeah, so it's not a small sales organization. I think the same is probably pretty true for some of the organizations that you led revenue enablement at previously. Maybe you can kind of share a little bit of like how how you got into enablement, and kind of the back, and then kind of like what the journey of that looked like for everyone here.
Like a lot of people, I'm sure, I am an accidental enabler. And here's what I mean by that. So when I was at InContact, which again is Contact Center as a Service, we also did Unified Communications. I was leading the Eastern U.S. AEs. I reported to the VP of Sales for the East, and was there, I think maybe it was about a year and a half or so into my time there. We had a change in CROs. and actually EVP of sales is what their title was. And so we had the new guy comes in, and after he'd been there a couple of months taking the lay of the land, I went in for my 101 on a Friday morning, like any other Friday, and he wrote sales enablement on his whiteboard. Now I'd been around tech sales since the late 90s. And this is probably September of 2012. And I'm looking at that and I'm like, I have never heard that term before. I kept that to myself and Googled it when I got back to my class. But then he started to explain to me what he defined sales enablement at, and he was actually pretty accurate. And then threw down the challenge for me that he'd observed how I was developing people as a sales leader. And that's another, and I invest heavily in my salespeople. I figured out early in my career, number one, from a selfish standpoint, I can't hit my number without them. But number two, we really owe that to people, right? As leaders, if we're not doing that, what are we doing? Seriously. So, and the sales org didn't get any kind of training or anything. So he said, I want you to go home for the weekend. I want you to think about everything I've talked about and what my priorities are. And if you'd be willing to take what you do for your team and scale it and do it for my whole organization. Oh, by the way, I'm planning to triple the sales org over the next 18 months. And
oh my goodness,
we'll need a boot camp for 8 enterprise reps in December. So I went home for the weekend, right? Laurie and I kicked it around, and I came back to him Monday, and I had a roughed out 30, 60, 90. And here we are about 10 years later. So like I say, very much, it's something I really never saw coming.
Yeah, but I think that's really important because, I think so much of the time, managers don't perceive themselves as like coaching and like behavioral upskilling is something that they spend their time doing. And it's more about like driving accountability, or probably like the worst case scenario is like managers that think that they're like super reps and like they're literally just there to
Right.
like, swoop in and close deals that are getting kind of caught up or what have you. And I think that there's kind of like two approaches, both of which I think are important. One is having a sales manager and sales leader who is used to those tactical selling behaviors go into enablement, so they have that subject matter expertise and have that credibility as well. And then have that kind of come back into the field. And then I think the second thing is, making it clear that coaching and upskilling is part of the manager's job, right?
Really
it's not like, oh yeah, like the enablement people, they'll do that for me. It's like, no, bro, right? Like that's what you're supposed to be spending your time doing. And I think like you're well positioned to kind of help with both of those. How has that kind of impacted how you do enablement?
I think the biggest way for that it impacted me was when I made that transition. I only cared about enablement in terms of how it would impact my boss's revenue at that point. Right? I mean, I don't believe you can come off the front line of sales or leading sales like I did and just all of a sudden not think, right? Because I had sat through my share of crap trainings in my career, and I'd sat through some good ones. And so that was my focus is, look, if we're going to ask these salespeople to step away from selling activity, it better be good. Right. And there better be some way that we're pretty sure that it's going to, make them help them be more successful. And I don't know that everybody that comes into sales enablement does or doesn't think that way. In my experience, I have talked to practitioners that don't. And this isn't a criticism. It's just, you asked how, it impacted me. And that's, I think, the biggest thing is I just have never, to me, sales enablement is not a means. It's not a means to an end, right? On its own, right? It is a means to drive revenue.
Yeah. And so like, where would you say that organizations kind of like what are the biggest mistakes that organizations make when doing a sales enablement program?
A couple of things come to mind. One, where does it report? I've always been an advocate of reporting to the highest sales leader that's possible within the organization. That's going to vary. If you go back and you follow Forrester, their research over the last decade or so, it's actually turned into pretty much a best practice. There are still some orgs that report it into marketing, and some have reporting into ops, but the trend is overwhelming that way. And the reason I feel strongly about that is we should be very most closely aligned with that chief sales officer and their number and their targets and what are they being measured on, right? Because what the RevOps team might be getting measured on, the marketing team is going to roll up to that CRO, right, at some level. And that's who I want to be aligned with. Not that I don't work closely with those other stakeholders I just mentioned. But in fact, I feel that so much so that every sales enablement job I've ever created is on a variable comp plan, like a sales plan.
Now, how like what proportion of it?
A junior person is 90-10, and I
like
top
a little
out.
kicker.
Yeah, right. I top out. I'm currently actually my last 2 jobs is I'm on a 60-40, and that's where I like to be. Right, and so I'm used to. So and it just ranges depending on seniority and responsibility.
And then the metric that it's tied to is it program based, or I mean maybe at your level it's just purely based on plan attainment for across the whole org?
No, everybody on my team is assigned a quota from RevOps, like a salesperson is. I mean, there are some differences, but they're paid out at the same time, and it follows the sales plan. So my belief is that if the sales team is succeeding, we deserve to participate in that. If the sales team is hurting, there's no way we should be going home, fat and sassy on every other Friday, right? Because it doesn't impact us, right? Now, to be clear, I measure my team on other things, right? When I'm looking at quarterly business reviews with them, end of year reviews, we measure quite a bit on our team of both leading and lagging indicators. And so their performance assessment that I do or their leaders do at the end of the year is very much based on things that they were, measured on through the year.
I love it. And is your point of view that all sales support functions should have the same sort of setup? So like whether you're talking about like operations or sales, like sales engineering or solutions consulting or what have you?
In my experience, a lot of sales engineers are on some variation of that of that kind of, there's variable in there, right?
More typical,
it may not look
but maybe less
like
typical
sales,
with ops. Yeah.
With ops, I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other, but I do know a couple of very senior operations pros that I have a lot of respect for that would like to get their teams on a plan like that, for what that's worth. But I don't personally have a strong one way or another.
Yeah, it's funny. Like every time I like variable compensation makes people nervous, and I think one of the things I remember, there was this really great modern sales pros like forum thread. Gosh, it might have been like 5 years ago at this point. Like I'm dating myself, right? And it was talking about some sales organizations that were thinking about moving away from variable compensation. And I think that variable compensation is really impactful because it does a couple of things that is generally helpful even outside of AEs or SDRs. And specifically, one, it really focuses attention on what matters. And it's like, hey, like, so you constantly have people thinking like, is this thing I'm about to do with my next 15 minutes or my next 30 minutes or whatever, is that going to, like, how does that connect to revenue, right? Like, oh, I guess rather than joining this meeting about like some other random thing, what if instead I spent this time helping a manager or training a rep or what have you, in the case of enablement? That's the first thing. And then the second thing that variable compensation really helps with is motivating incremental effort, right? And this is something I always think about this. I was walking out of our office here. So we're in San Francisco, and we're in Second Market downtown. And I was walking out of the office. I don't know, it was like 5:30 or whatever, 6, and I saw one of our SDRs walking back into the office, and I was like, hey, what's the deal? And she was like, oh, I was just checking my email while waiting for the bus, and I noticed that I had a response from a prospect. So
Nice.
I'm gonna pop back inside really quickly and go,
Mhm.
go book it and create the opportunity, because like you never know, right? Like you
Right.
never
Right.
know, like it might not be there tomorrow morning. And I was like, you damn Skippy, that's right, right? Like an incremental, and so we would love to tell ourselves a story that motivation is intrinsic, and ideally if you're hiring correctly, like
Right.
hopefully you're hiring for people with intrinsic motivation who want to be
Agree.
successful, what have you.
Yeah.
But even better if like it's kind of like chocolate and peanut butter. Like,
Yeah.
hey, we're gonna
Yeah.
hire for that internal motivation, that intrinsic motivation, and high levels of like execution and grind. Oh, and by the way, we're also going to have this kicker that's going to reinforce things for you as
Right.
well. And I think those two things, right,
Mhm.
focus on what's important and then also drive marginal marginal effort, can be consistent across, or like that applies to every role, even outside of the sales organization, which is maybe a
Mhm.
little bit of a controversial take. And then people kind of get grumped. They're like, oh, well, I don't necessarily have impact on whether or not, like I don't have totality of impact and
Mhm.
on XYZ thing. Like I'm reliant on someone else. It's like, uh-huh. Like AEs don't have totality of control over their deals,
No.
right? Like there's a buyer
No.
on the other end, right? And it just like ideally comes out with a large enough sample size that comes out in the wash. So
Right.
I'm a big fan of variable compensation in that regard, and I'm glad to hear that that's the case. So has that always been the case in your roles, or is this a more
Yeah.
recent thing?
No, this has always been the case. And again, it stems from that transition back in 2012 because Bill Robinson was my boss then. And if you're and so the way he put it to me as he talked to me about this, and he said, look, as you're thinking this through, talking with your family, he said, I don't want you to worry about your compensation plan. I'm going to keep you on the same comp plan you are as a sales director. It's just now you're going to be measured on his number instead of your 8 people,
Your
right?
teams,
So
yeah.
yeah, and so yeah, that's how we came into it. And so when I did start doing hires and things, it just made sense to me to continue it. The other thing that I have found with it, not that we go around trumpeting that information, but when
Mhm.
it does come up with either sales leaders or sales individual contributors,
Mhm.
they're actually pleasantly surprised to find out
Right.
that we've got
Like,
skin in
oh,
the game
you're in the same
alongside
boat.
them.
You're in
Yeah.
the same boat as me. That
Yep.
I think, like when you're a support role, this is
Mhm.
something that I was talking with a VP of sales operations about this the other day. This is like the perennial challenge of being
Mhm.
a sales support person. So operations or enablement is like, yeah, get out of here, nerd. Yeah,
Mhm.
as if you know what you're talking about, right? Like that
Mhm.
sort of thing. And so the more credibility you can have, like you always, I guess it's internal selling, right? Like
Right. Oh, yeah.
the more that you can have credibility. And so like there's a variety of different ways that you can have more credibility. You can be a seller by background, like
Mhm.
you, right? You can have expertise and demonstrate that expertise, like, oh, okay, cool. Like you don't think like, you don't believe that I should be teaching you how to do your disco call. All right, ready? I'm gonna take this op, right? I'm gonna do the disco call here, and like,
Mhm.
I'm gonna flex on you. And then in this case, like, yeah, we like, 30% of my paycheck or 40% of my paycheck is at risk from a performance standpoint, just like your team. So,
Mhm. Yeah.
we're in the same boat. Um, Cool. So, changing gears a little bit here, I think one of the things that a lot of organizations have a tendency to do from an enablement standpoint is they're very, very focused on rep enablement, and
Mhm.
this is kind of related to what we were talking about before about how managers ought to be coaching, they ought to be upskilling their
Mhm.
reps.
Mhm.
But I think the challenge is, if you think about where a lot of managers come from, they come from they come from being former AEs or former SDRs or what
Right.
have you,
Right.
and they don't necessarily have the that coaching capability or mindset or whatever. Now, of course, the way that you would do that is you would teach them how to do that.
Yeah.
Like you would say,
Right.
hey, you're supposed to do this. Here's how to do this. Let's do some
Mhm.
drilling on it. Let's give you some assets by which to do this. Let's create a accountability framework for you to make sure that you actually are coaching there.
Yep.
A lot of organizations don't do that, and so I wonder, and like managers have more leverage. Like I don't know how big your enablement team at Instructure is, but I mean, even if it's like a half dozen people, that's like that'd be like a pretty substantial investment. That's still very small as
Right.
compared to the dozens of sales managers that
Oh,
are
yeah.
there. So like one, why do you think that organizations don't invest in managers as much as they should? And like, what's a good way of kind of like solving that, do you think?
I don't know that my initial response is an organizational thing as much as it is a cultural thing.
Hmm.
And I've seen too often sales managers get to that level, and if they have or had a desire for learning and continuous learning, it ends when they get to that point in their career. And so if the company doesn't have, or at least the Rev Org doesn't have that learning, the culture of learning, being curious, staying on top of your game, then a lot of them won't make the initiative to do it. Now, some
Yeah.
do, but that's one of the first things I've seen. And to be fair, I think a lot of it is because they can be overwhelmed if they're not set up for success. Especially, you mentioned the manager as super closer. It's short term can be successful. Long term, it leads to burnout and it doesn't scale. And right, I mean,
Yep.
we've all seen the hero to zero crash and burn of someone's career because they were not enabled and supported properly when they were promoted. And I think the other thing is for the managers themselves. Another thing that I've seen is trying to clone themselves on their
Yeah.
team. Again, they were promoted because they were wildly successful,
Right.
and trying to just coach the team to sell like they sold.
Yeah, like one size fits all. Interesting.
Right. And so being able to, I don't know whether that's ego or that's just default mode. It worked
It's
for
probably
me,
like,
so it
yeah,
must.
default.
Yeah, default mode. And then there's also those that I call it the great for thee but not for me syndrome, where they've just said, yeah, my reps really need that, but I've got this wired, and they might. But the point that I try to help them understand is there's a couple of reasons for you to be there. Number one, you're showing investment, right? If you're there, the team knows that they should be sitting up, paying attention, and all of that, and they know that you're
Exactly.
invested enough in that knowledge that you showed up. And I said, but maybe even more importantly is after, whether that's a training, or, methodology work, whatever it is, as enablement, we can't drive it past a certain point.
Exactly.
Those salespeople may like us, they may respect us, but they don't report to us. And so when push comes to shove, if this isn't something that you're spiraling through your sales meetings or bringing up in your pipeline reviews, et cetera, it's not going to, yes, some reps are going to get it and they're going to run with it, but for the most part, it's just not going to stick. And so if you're not there hearing it the way they're hearing it, it's going to be a lot harder to support them through the change. Because ultimately, isn't a lot of this, that's what it is change management. A lot of what we do in enablement. So.
Yeah. Well, buddy of mine is this gentleman named Brett Burson, who is a partner at First Round Capital. And he had this really thoughtful tweet that I always come back to on a recurring basis, which is, and I know, Paul, you're a musician, so I think you'll appreciate this. Like, what do you do professionally that is the equivalent of that is the equivalent of a pianist playing scales, right? So like da 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 da, right? Because that's the way that you get like that muscle memory going. And I forget, are you a bassist or a guitarist? I'm trying to remember which
guitars for most of my life. Picked up bass out of necessity because we lost our bass player in the band probably about 5 or 6 years ago.
So like, I'm sure you can empathize with that, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, just recurringly doing riffs just to get like the finger like muscle memory. And the same is true as managers. And if you think about the capabilities as a manager, what you're supposed to be able to do is it's observe a shortfall in some sort of behavior, right? So like observe what's going on, whether that's like metrically or like from a micro behavior standpoint. Like, oh, you see how that was a closed-ended question, or did you see how you went on too long there when you should have like stopped yourself right there? Did you see that there was an opportunity for a trial close there, etc.? So like observing and then providing that feedback,
Right.
right? Of just like, hey, let's do this, and then hold and like accountability. And so like what we're describing right now, like these are behaviors that a manager ought to be doing, and then they should be thinking about like, hey, as a manager, am I scoring points? Like, am I giving feedback on a recurring basis? Right? Am I observing something and like maybe like squinting or like kind of like wincing and being like, but now I'm not actually correcting it in the
Right.
moment? Am I not, do I not have a coaching plans in place for my reps? Like these are the mechanisms by which you would score points as a manager. And if you're
Right.
not doing those behaviors, right, you're not doing your scales, right? You're not
Right.
playing your riffs. And I think that's something that managers and also leaders should be thinking about, like, what are the behaviors I'm supposed to be doing, and am I doing enough of them? And to make sure that I'm doing a good job from from those scales. When you think about the things that managers ought to be doing, right? So if we have managers or like leaders who are with us here today, we're like, yeah, you know what? I really should be holding my managers to account on specific behaviors that they could like measure, right? Or even if like, you're just like marking it down on a post-it note, like how many times I'm doing XYZ a week or a month. What do you think would the key behaviors would be that you would encourage there?
I'm going to start with coaching. And
Yep.
there are some, so, previously asked what should managers be able to do? That's a big one. Especially if they're first-time managers, even if they're not, I wouldn't assume that they have a good coaching framework, but certainly first-time sales leaders, this is outside of anything they would have done up to that point in their career, unless maybe they coach a sports team or something. But so if we're not helping them learn a coaching framework, and any good coaching framework is going to have trackability, whether it's spreadsheets,
Yep.
whether it's, and there's one that I've used for some time that I really, really like. And, that particular company started teaching how to do their coaching framework with spreadsheets. And they were really, that they built, customized with their clients and all of that. Now there's some software that'll help do it. But no matter how you do it, teach them to coach, because by having that coaching framework, you also have coaching goals, expectations, and you're tracking those one-on-ones. And so it becomes very clear to the rep, the leader, and the leader's leader whether or not this is happening. Like you say, are you doing your scales? Are you playing your scales? And over time, there's accountability built into it. Are we having an impact? Or what you call scoring points, right? Are they scoring points as a manager? And so no matter what framework you use, you need one. You need to help the leaders understand it, and there needs to be some sort of tracking and accountability mechanism. And it's not so tracking also to keep on top of them, make sure they're doing their job. Mostly what is important are the salespeople, because coaching is sometimes tough love. It's not all just pipeline and things like that. And so when you're saying, look, these are expectations, they're not being met, that sort of thing. A good coaching framework puts the salesperson, or anyone really, on the hook for the accountability. So you and I are having a coaching conversation, like, Pete, this is something I'm seeing in your pipeline. You're pretty light on the ground, buddy, after this quarter, next 2 quarters. I don't see how you're going to get there. And so what are you going to do by the time we meet in 2 weeks again to make a change? We have that conversation, but see, you own it. So I'm not going to tell you what to do. You're going to tell me what you're going to do to get better coverage, and you're going to commit to do it. And you bet I'm going to ask about it when I talk to you in 2 weeks. So that's one of the critical elements that I've seen a coaching framework also solves for.
Yeah, I think I think you might be referring to closed loops. So Corey Bray and Hellman Sori's coach framework, because I'm recognizing it, because I have 5 Secrets of Sales Coach is like my favorite sales coaching book. Like we give away like so many copies of it to our
that's right. I forgot you
customers.
Do. Yeah, that's right. It's Corey and Hillman, closed loop. I just didn't want to throw names out there.
So like, the reason why we give away so many copies of this is because this is something that, Atrium exists to help managers improve performance using
Mm-hmm.
data and metrics. And so the mechanism by which you do that is like you observe something is off
Right.
through some sort of like metric, like, ooh, man, your untouched opportunity counts is
Mm-hmm.
gross, right? Like
Yeah.
that's a pipeline hygiene problem in a very meaningful way. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's not like that's going to be a metric that you're going to observe. And so, but now in order for us to change behavior, that's where the coaching is going to come in. And so that's like, hey, and you know what? I went and I looked at some of the other KPIs here. Like I saw your untouched opportunities
Mm-hmm.
counts is like really in the toilet. Um, but you actually don't have meaningfully more opportunities than the rest of the team. Like you're right there at like 35 with like pretty much everybody else. So like I could see if you had 50 and you were, it was time to like clean out some dead wood and what have you. And like, those are like, that's why they're untouched. These look like they're live ops and like, you're just kind of like not doing it. So
Yeah.
what we're going to do is we're going to block some time on your calendar, an hour, maybe 90 minutes, 2 times a week on a recurring basis. And like, you're going to get after that. And what I want you to do is like, we're going to come back in 2 weeks and we're going to look at this
Mm-hmm.
metric right here.
Mm-hmm.
And, my intention is that it's going to be more in line with everybody else here.
Mm-hmm.
And not kind of this dumpster fire right here. And then moreover, as you're executing these, this pipeline management, these pipeline management blocks, I want you to CC me on them,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Right.
I want to see it, right? Because presumably it'll probably be email based. Like maybe it'll drop in some calls, but if you're making a call, you're probably going to send an email as well. I want to be
Right.
CC'd on that.
Right.
And so like that's an example of like an accountability behavior that's happening there. And you can see so, and this is something that meaningfully changed the way that I coach when I
Mm-hmm.
read 5 Secrets to Sales Coach, is putting it on the rep to bring the information to me. So in this case, it was like,
Right.
you're going to CC me on this, or maybe it's a different coaching conversation. Like, hey, look, I'm observing that you have a problem getting out of disco. And when we
Mm-hmm.
went and listened to your calls, I'm noticing that you're not you're not closing for the next step, right? You're
Right.
not closing for that meeting. And so what I like, obviously that's why, your conversion rate out of disco is problematic, and like why your follow-up meeting ratio isn't where it needs to be. We're going to fix that. But the mechanism by which we're going to fix that is you're going to, on the next 10 first calls you have across the next,
Mm-hmm.
the next 2 weeks, you're going to send me the chorus clip or the gong clip or
Mm-hmm.
whatever clip.
Right.
You're going to send
Right.
me that clip. Like, I'm not going to go shopping in there.
Right.
You're going to
No, it's
send
not my
me,
job. Yeah.
yeah, you're going to send me that. And so
Mm-hmm.
what's going to happen is in pre-call planning, you're going to be thinking about the fact that, oh man, I got to send Pete that clip of
Mm-hmm.
my, my upfront contract, or the fact that I closed for the next meeting or what have you. And so like now you're setting your intention ahead of the
Right.
call, because you know
Right.
that accountability loop is there. And then like, lo and behold, it actually now
Mm-hmm.
happens. Like, so
Yeah.
these are examples that like, of like like putting putting accountability mechanisms in place, and then also putting it on the rep to bring it back to
And I think
you.
that's the key, because too
Yeah.
often sales managers it's more of a top down command and control, right? This is what you need to do. This is what and I love, that's one of the things I really like about that particular framework, is the fact that the onus is on the salesperson to come up with their action plan and commit to it.
Yeah, I love that. And then I think there's almost like a meta, right? Like, this is something that I talk to my investors about all the time, because we joke about like, I work at a software company that I happen to start, and everyone's like, oh, you're the founder of the software company. I'm like, no way, man. Everyone's got a boss, right? Like, you think I'm
Right.
the big boss? No, I
Exactly.
got bosses too. And guess what? They got bosses too. And so
Mm-hmm.
like, as a sales manager, what would be the accountability that they need, right? Like, it's like, cool, I want to make sure that you have a coaching plan in place for every
Mm-hmm.
single one of your reps. And I want you to bring to me, the sales leader or what have you, the VP of
Mm-hmm.
sales, what those coaching plans are. And
Mm-hmm.
and also I want to see how those metrics have changed over time. So like, you have 8 reps. This rep here has pipeline hygiene problems. This rep right here
Right.
has activity problems. This rep right here has like, they've got everything all dialed in, and instead what we're going to do with her is we're going to try to drive up ASPs, right? Whatever it is, like I want to see that there's a plan in place, and in a month from now, we're going to come back together here and we're going to see like how those metrics have changed for all those different folks.
There's
right,
also
like
another
everyone's got a
dynamic.
boss,
Yeah.
right?
Right. And there's another dynamic to that, which is that SVP or VP of sales should have a coaching plan in place for the sales leader that reports to them.
Right.
So that they're working on, right? So yes, it's important for them to bring back and show how they're holding their people accountable. But what about them? Right.
Sure.
And so all the way up, like I said, everybody has a boss. And if you follow this methodology to its, to the way it's supposed to be followed, everybody, up the chain is going to have a coaching plan. Very different skills, very different things that are probably being measured and looked at and coached, but it's there.
Yeah. Changing gears a little bit,
Yeah.
because we're talking about how everyone, like, how coaching is so impactful. Now the problem, of course, is this is one of the things that has enabled kind of like rep-centric coaching is the easier availability of like easy metrics and easy analytics and what have you. So on a rep by rep basis, we can say, hey, you know what, we're going to focus on this with you. We're going to focus on this with Susie. We're going to focus on this with Bobby or what have you. This is in contrast to kind of like the historical way of doing things where you might say, hey, we're going to do blanket enablement or blanket coaching across the team. Right. Now that being said, there are situations wherein blanket enablement is really important, like a new product shipped,
acquisitions.
Right. Acquisition. Like there's some sort of like key initiative in place. Like, hey, you know what? Like, I don't know, like right now, hey, economic tough times. We're not going to be hiring as many SDRs, or maybe we we reduce the size of the SDR team a little bit there. So guess
our
what?
Marketing funds are cut back in a down economy. That's too often the case.
Yeah, exactly. So like, guess what, AEs, like we're going to need you to be doing some more prospecting there. This is something that's going to show up across the entire organization. We're going to do an enablement program around that, and then measure, right? Like measure the outputs across the org. When you think about, like, I think there's kind of two questions here around focus. One is, what's the right number of things to be coaching those individual reps on? So like, Bobby, right? Susie. And then secondarily, like, what's the right number of, org-wide initiatives to be focused on? Because like, you don't want to boil the ocean, but on the same time, like, to the extent that like you can parallelize something, right? Like not just have one, then you can potentially like pat your head and rub your belly at the same time. What's your kind of perspective on the right number of things, of priorities to be going after?
No more than 3. I found this in my own professional life, and there's a lot of research that I read that helped me, start that thinking and taking that path. A lot of research that shows for most people and most organizations. I'll give you an example. Book called The Strategy Focused Organization, Norton and Kaplan, Harvard Business Press, probably about 20 some years ago. But the point is that their research extensively showed this, that any organization that tries to take on more than 3 at once won't do any of them well. And I've seen that often translates into personal performance and things. So if we're going to be enabling salespeople, and say you've got a methodology that was recently rolled out that needs to have spiraling and reinforcement, you also have new product update. And so there might be new use cases and things they need to learn, right? To your point, you have to be able to parallel process. But where I feel like keeping it under 3 or no more than 3 is more critical for sales enablement is we have to always be very conscious of how much of their time are we asking, right? There's all kinds of research out there that shows it's a shockingly low percentage of the time that sellers actually get to spend selling when you filter out sales meetings, doing, Salesforce updates, deal desk negotiate, right? And so as enablers, we just need to be really conscious. And sometimes you may only get to focus on one thing, and the leaders will help you decide what's that most important thing, because the sales team is maybe going through a crunch and they've got to be doubling down, that sort of thing. But So that's my
No
general
more than
answer.
3.
Your mileage may vary, right? But yeah, just more than 3 things. Just things get noisy.
Yeah, I think from an individual rep standpoint, this is I don't know, but Paul, are you much of a golfer? Yeah, no.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. So the kind of analog that I like to use is kind of focus on one part of the swing at any given point in time, right? Like
Right.
if you're trying to like change multiple parts of the swing, then that's
Right.
you're gonna have trouble.
Right.
That said, you could be focusing on something on your swing. At the
Mhm.
same time, what you could be doing is you could be focusing on like club selection,
Right.
right?
Right.
Or
How to read the course. Yeah.
having an intention, like it's related, but like they're not going to
No.
fight with each other, right? So like
Right. Exactly.
it might be club selection, or like I'm really focusing on hitting, like I'm really setting an intention on hitting my fairways,
Right.
right? We did
Right.
a really fun master class on data-driven golf and data-driven sales management the other day, and so like and I think the same thing this can apply to reps as well, where it's like,
Mhm.
hey, we're gonna be focusing on something that is call centric,
Mhm.
right? We're gonna be focusing on something that is call centric, and that might be like your swing, if you will. Like, hey,
Mhm.
you know what? We're gonna really focus on brevity with you,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
we're gonna focus on getting them to talk more. Literally, what I want you to say is, I want to hear, say more. Say more. Like I
Mhm.
just want you to drop that like 3 times a call, and that's like a
Mhm.
call behavior we're going to focus on. At the same time, we're going to focus on a pipeline management behavior,
Right.
right? That
Right.
is like, okay, cool, like we're going to be a better professional around calendar management or inbox management or what have you.
Mhm.
Those 2 things won't fight with each
Right.
other, right? Versus like, hey, there's like 4 things that I want you to change in the way that you like do calls. Like, good luck.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right?
Well, no, it's
Right?
overwhelming. And it's the same for the leaders. So you're developing leaders, especially a newly promoted leader. Yep. We talked extensively about they need a coaching framework. They need to develop those muscles and get comfortable with that. They also likely need some other leadership things, right? What about how to show empathy as a leader?
Mhm.
Or, right, again, it's not going to conflict with the coaching thing. What about how to analyze a pipeline?
Sure.
An individual contributor in
Inspect
sales,
deals.
yeah, does it just they don't have that, right? And so I would just say always keep that in mind for enabling those leaders too, is that you can have them working on a couple different things.
Yeah, but I think the important thing is like we don't want them to fight, right? We don't want them to fight. But
Exactly.
like we
Right.
can
Right.
we can rub our belly and pat our head at the same time,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
But maybe we can't do two things at our belly
Yeah.
at the same time. Wonderful. Well, Paul, any other kind of like parting thoughts on how to how to drive better coaching behavior and kind of like a more of a coaching culture
Sure.
into an organization?
Okay, this is like such an abused phrase, but it really applies here, right? We treasure what we measure. I mean, I don't know how many decades ago I heard that, but it's so true. That's why it's still around. And so from a coaching standpoint, expectations for that coaching culture, expectations for the accountability need to start at the top. And every leader in the line going, down needs to be invested in it. Right. That's where it really needs to start. Not saying that an individual frontline sales manager, if their organization is not adopting these things, they can certainly go learn them and put them in place for their team. In fact, I did that a few times in my career. That's what my boss noticed in Contact, for example. When you join that organization as a salesperson at the time, you got the same 2.5 days in room with HR that everybody else got. And then
Hmm.
depending on your manager, you either got some good training or you got no training or something in between. Um, and so work on that culture, decide together as leadership. Our CRO currently, my CRO, is very good at this. He's always reminding people, surgeons have to go recertify a certain number of
Yeah.
hours every year, right?
Hmm.
And that sort of thing. So that would be probably the biggest thing that I would leave with is this stuff counts. And I noticed we had a question too, so I don't know if you want to get to that one now or.
Oh yeah, maybe we can do that really quickly. I didn't notice that. Question for Paul: when were you first introduced to sales enablement? Got started with it? Anytime you find yourself wanting to go back to managing reps? That's a great question. Thanks, Michelle. Great question. What do you think? You want to go back to managing reps?
Yeah, sometimes.
Nice.
I mean, sales, and it wasn't just when I was a new leader, right, or a new sales enablement. It still pops up sometimes. One of the hardest things. Okay, here's an example. Even today, I have not led a sales team in 10 years, and it just feels so bizarre to check out for Christmas with the rest of the company. Because normally my whole career, you're working straight up through 11:59 on December 31st, right? It's just so I kind of miss some of that. And sales is such a binary world, very black and white. And that's nice in some ways. I mean, it's not easy to measure sales enablement, right? We've had conversations about this, but it's really easy to measure whether or not you're getting your job done as a sales manager. And the third thing that I miss is just that thrill of winning. Okay, it's hard to beat it. It's hard to beat. So yeah, Michelle, I still miss it some days. So.
I love it. Wonderful. Well, Angelica, I see that you're here to kick us out. Thank you.
Hello, hello. Thank you, Paul and Pete, for this amazing content on sales enablement. I love your quote, Paul, on "We treasure what we measure." Such a great quote. I'm going to drop a link on to get your copy of the Qualified Sales Leader plus more Atrium goodies, so don't forget to click that link. And just a reminder that the recording and key takeaways will be made available on the MSP website, so stay tuned for that. Paul, Pete, thank you again, and thank you everyone for attending. We'll see you at the next event.